I was in the middle of writing up a consult when the trauma pager went off. Code red, male, late 20s, vehicle strike, non-responsive, low BP, ETA 5 minutes. I jogged to the trauma bay, grabbed the intake clipboard from the nurse's desk, and stared straight at the name printed across the top, Charlie Carter. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't skip. It just dropped, clean and heavy, like a rock off a cliff. Charlie, my younger brother, the same guy who'd burned my life to the ground with one lie and a forged piece of paper. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from, and let's continue. I wasn't in a position to feel anything. I was the senior overnight trauma lead at Redwood Bay. If I hesitated now, I wasn't a man with a grudge. I was a liability. So I did what I was trained to do. I turned to Joni, the nurse, and said, "Page Dr. Mott, tell him I'm stepping aside. Conflict of interest." She nodded, no questions. I signed the disclosure line, everything clean, everything by the book. But inside I was standing in the middle of a slow-burning wreck that started years earlier. And Charlie lit the match. "My name's Trevor Carter. I'm 65 now. I'm telling you this because that night, January of 1992, was when the lie finally died. It had lived too long. Back in 1989, I was deep in surgical residency, grinding through long shifts, no margin for mistakes. My best friend, Evan Sutter, got sick, really sick, and I took an approved leave to help him. The paperwork was real, clean, signed. Charlie knew all of that. I told him myself. But somewhere in that golden boy brain of his, he saw an opening. He twisted the truth into something else. Said I quit, said I cracked under pressure, said I was lying. And my parents, they didn't ask a single question. They believed him, fully, immediately, like they'd been waiting for proof I was a disappointment. I mailed them documents. They sent them back. I called. They hung up. One time, my mother wrote, "Return to sender," in her own handwriting. Like I was spam. They cut me off clean and easy while I was just trying to survive. So I left. I put together a life that didn't revolve around begging people to believe me. I got married. I became the guy hospitals called when things went south. And for years, I lived like they were dead. Then that winter night landed in my lap. Charlie came in through the ER doors, unconscious, bloodied, half dead. And there I was, reading the name of the man who'd buried me alive and realizing I was the one who might have to save him. That look Charlie gave me when I got into the program, it never left my head, a flicker, that fast, like someone weighing what he'd just lost and what it would take to get it back. He didn't blow up. Charlie never did drama when it counted. He let me have my moment, clapped me on the back, and told me how proud he was. But his mouth smiled and his eyes calculated. That's how it always was with him. Everything was theater, and the performance shifted based on the audience. Growing up outside Briar Glen was like being under glass. Small town, same families, same gossip. If your last name got brought up, it either earned you favors or made people lock their doors. The Carter name, it meant solid, reliable, no nonsense. That was thanks to my dad, Gideon. The man walked around like the town's building codes were tattooed on his spine. Clipboard in one hand, coffee thermos in the other, and a permanent scowl like the world was always one screw-up away from collapsing. He wasn't loud, but he didn't need to be. People listened when he talked because there was never a second line coming. No warm-up, no follow-up, just the law according to him. My mom, Maris, handled the other side. She worked at the clinic, smiled more, and used words like compromise and just let it go, like they were magical fixes. If my dad was the wall, my mom was the rug you swept things under. When Charlie lied, she'd say, "He didn't mean it." When I got overlooked, she'd say, "You know how your father is. If you made a mess quietly, she cleaned it up. If you raised your voice, she disappeared. Charlie figured that out young. He had a gift for making people feel seen, especially adults. Teachers would say, "He's such a bright spirit," and neighbors told my mom, "That boy of yours, he's going places." Meanwhile, I was the one building volcano models in the garage and taking apart radios just to understand how they worked. I didn't charm, I didn't interrupt, I just did the work. In our house, quiet didn't earn praise, it earned invisibility. I remember one night I had just won that science award, something I'd worked myself ragged for, and I came home carrying that certificate like it meant something. My dad barely looked up from the sports section and said, "Good job, Trev." Same tone he used when our neighbor's kid made honor roll. Then he checked his watch and asked what time Charlie's banquet started. Just like that. No pause, no wait. Like my win was just a blip between Charlie's real moment. It should have made me angry, but back then it just made me tired. That was the rhythm. Charlie the star, me the backdrop. Any reaction beyond quiet acceptance just got you labeled sensitive, or worse, selfish. So I swallowed it, learned to survive on crumbs and keep walking. The only adult who ever noticed the pattern and didn't excuse it was my Aunt Alda Wren. She wasn't warm or gushy, she dealt in records and facts. Her version of affection was precision. But every now and then, when we were alone, she'd look at me and say, "I see what's happening. It's not your imagination." That one line kept me upright more than any hug would have. When I got into med school, something shifted in my dad. He didn't throw a party or say much, but I saw it. The nod he gave me had weight. For once, I wasn't just the quiet kid. I was the son he could mention to coworkers without lowering his voice, and Charlie saw it too. His smile didn't flicker, his words didn't slip, but his eyes, they did that math again, fast, sharp, cold, the way you'd calculate what it takes to cut a man back down to size. So I kept moving, quietly, like always. No announcement, no attention, just packed up and headed west. First Albuquerque, then back east. I chased training programs that didn't overlap with family holidays, places where no one knew my last name, where I could introduce myself without the weight of someone else's version of me dragging behind. That's where Evan Sutter came in. He was loud in a way that made people relax, wore a hoodie to everything, talked too loud, and had this messed up habit of giving his food away if someone else looked hungry. Came out of a string of foster homes with no real safety net, but the guy never played victim. You'd offer him help, and he'd grin and say, "Save it for someone who needs it," then hand you a cup of gas station coffee like he was the one doing the favor. Evan was my anchor in a world that never stopped spinning. We met during intern year, and somehow we just clicked. He was the first person in my life who didn't need me to explain why silence could feel safer than speaking. In August of 1989, he started getting winded just walking between wings, brushed it off, cracked jokes. Then came the labs, scans, biopsies. Things got bad, fast. I filed for leave the second I saw how serious it was. Residency wasn't a game to me, but Evan was family in every way that counted. I did it right. Official form, supervisor sign-off, clean trail, no drama, just a break to keep someone breathing. Stupid part, I still thought I owed my actual family the truth, so I picked up the phone and called home. Charlie answered. At first it was normal, like brothers. I told him about the leave, why I took it, that it wasn't permanent. I told him where I was staying, what hospital Evan was being treated at. Too many details. Charlie was friendly, a little too friendly. And now that I look back, his voice got smoother the longer I talked, like he was turning the story over in his hands, looking for the angle. 3 nights later, my father called. No hello, no how are you. He started right in, said he knew everything. said Charlie told them I'd quit the program, lied about it, said I'd thrown away years of work and was too ashamed to admit it. He accused me of sneaking around and said I was playing games with the family name. I tried to talk, to explain, but my mom started crying in the background the way she always did, like emotion meant something by itself. She asked, "Why would you lie like this?" in that voice that trembled just enough to make her the victim. My dad said Charlie had proof, something in writing, a letter. I asked what kind of letter. He just said it looked official. I told him I could fax over the real documents, put him on the phone with my program director. I said, "Just let me show you the truth." He didn't hesitate. He said, "Don't call back until you're ready to tell the truth," like the truth was something he owned, not me. Then he hung up. I didn't scream, I didn't throw the phone. I just stood there with my hand still on the receiver and this dead quiet in my chest, like something important had just left the building and wasn't coming back. Over the next week, I tried everything, called at different times, sent letters, mailed hard copies of my leave form with a note in my own handwriting. The envelope came back unopened. My mom had written, "Return to sender," across the front, like I was a telemarketer she never asked for. I called Alda. She didn't hesitate, said, "I'll call him." Later, she told me what he said, "Stay out of Carter business." Just like that, like we were some kind of firm and I'd been fired for insubordination. While all that was happening, Evan was getting worse. Night sweats, fevers, organ stress. I was trying to coordinate care, deal with case managers, call in favors, beg for time. And in between all that, I was learning how it feels when the people who raised you would rather hold on to a lie than face the possibility they got it wrong. Evan died on a gray afternoon in February of 1990. No big last words, no music playing, just a final exhale that told me it was over. I stayed until the nurse shut off the monitors and walked out. Then I sat there a little longer because there was still paperwork and someone had to make the phone calls. No one else was coming. My parents weren't picking up. Charlie didn't answer. I left voicemails anyway, cold, blunt ones. "Evan's gone. Don't bother calling back." The service was small. A few people from the hospital, one old foster family that had kept in touch. A girl Evan used to date showed up with red eyes and a coat too thin for the weather. That was it. Nobody made a speech. We just stood in the wind and said goodbye like men digging a hole and filling it themselves. Afterward, I went back to training. There wasn't a choice. Residency doesn't pause for grief, and bills don't cancel themselves because your best friend died holding your hand. I buried myself in shifts, night float, double weekends. Every complex case they'd throw at me, I'd take. Not because I wanted to prove anything, because silence felt cleaner when you earned it with work. I didn't talk about my family. What was I supposed to say? My brother forged documents to ruin me, and my parents signed the death certificate on our relationship without blinking. Nobody would believe it. I barely did. That's when I found Belka. It was a one-line ad taped up at a coffee shop near the hospital. Terrier mix, smart, too much energy, needs home. I showed up to the shelter out of curiosity more than anything else. They brought her out and she looked at me like she already knew what I'd been through. First day home, she stole a bowl of mixed nuts off the kitchen counter and barked at me when I tried to take it back. I named her Belka right then and let her keep the nuts. She became the one creature who never asked questions and never gave me the polite tilt of the head that meant, "What happened with your folks?" After back-to-back shifts, I'd come home, and there she was, tail wagging, eyes sharp, ready to go for a walk like nothing else mattered. It sounds small. It wasn't. I finished residency and took a position at Redwood Bay Trauma Center in Halleridge, Pennsylvania, full attending, real title, real responsibility, no nepotism, no shortcuts, just room to work that I earned by outworking every excuse in the room. Dr. Lenora Pike ran that place like a drill sergeant with a brain. She didn't care where you came from, only how you handled pressure. She wasn't warm, but she was fair, the kind of fair I hadn't known growing up. When I screwed something up, she called me on it straight. When I nailed it, she didn't clap, she just gave a short nod. I lived for that nod. Years passed like that. Long days, clean cases, no drama. Then Alda called me. Her voice was even like always. She said, "I've got something." Turned out Charlie hadn't just twisted my words. He'd shown our parents a forged document, something that looked official. She'd kept quiet because she didn't want to make noise without proof. But she had it now. Paperwork, dates, discrepancies, the whole rotten setup. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood in my kitchen, phone in one hand, and said, "Of course he did." Because that was Charlie's genius. He never made the lie huge. He made it believable, comfortable. And our parents, they always picked comfort over truth. I didn't meet Dahlia through friends or some setup. She was at the hospital, working an ethics consult tied to a malpractice case. Straight posture, soft voice, zero tolerance for nonsense. She didn't waste words and didn't throw around compliments like candy. I liked that immediately. We crossed paths during meetings. She asked clear questions, listened hard, and moved on like she had better things to do than babysit doctors. After a while, we started staying back to talk. First about cases, then about books, then about anything but work. That's how it started. Quiet, steady, no agenda. Dahlia had this calm way of being honest without making it a weapon. You never felt cornered by her. But you also didn't get to dodge anything. That balance pulled me in. I told her the family story slowly, over time. I didn't give her the full version at once, just pieces, because part of me still hated how it sounded when I said it out loud. Grown man, working professional, still talking about what his brother did 10 years ago like it happened last week. She didn't flinch. She didn't offer cliches. When I told her how Charlie twisted the truth and my parents ran with it, Dahlia leaned back and said, "That's not confusion, that's targeted behavior." Nobody had ever called it that before, not jealousy, not old-fashioned parenting, not a sibling rivalry, a campaign. That one word cleared the fog in my head. She was right. Charlie hadn't just stumbled into lies. He built them, step by step, and kept feeding them until they looked real. Dahlia didn't push me toward forgiveness. She helped me build structure. She taught me how to stop performing pain for people who weren't watching. We kept track of the mail that came back unopened. We logged every date, every missed call, every envelope with return to sender in my mother's handwriting, not to make a case, to stop rewriting history in my own head. Around the same time, Joni Rusk, the charge nurse at Redwood Bay, became another constant. She'd been in more waiting rooms than most people had birthdays. She'd seen the fake tears, the rehearsed outrage, the family members who only showed up when it looked good. Joni didn't say much, but when she did, you listened. One night, after a messy shift, she handed me a cup of bad coffee and said, "I've seen your type. The one they blame because you don't perform on cue. Doesn't make you wrong." When Dahlia and I got married, it was simple. Backyard near Halleridge, folding chairs, string lights. Joni came. Lenora came. Alda stood off to the side with that quiet smile like she already knew I'd end up okay. Dahlia wore deep green, no veil. We didn't write vows. We didn't need to. I mailed my parents an invitation, not out of hope, out of clarity. I wanted it on record that I didn't disappear. I was excluded. It came back a week later, sealed, unsigned. My mother's handwriting again. Dahlia didn't say, "Maybe next time." She said, You're allowed to call that what it is. That's what she gave me, not pity, precision. When I slipped into old habits, explaining, softening, justifying, she'd stop me and say, "Is this helping, or are you trying to win people who like you small?" That one hit hard. Somewhere in the middle of all that, she mentioned a case she was circling, a string of hit and runs. One name kept showing up, some local equipment guy, always around, always smooth, always with an explanation. The name didn't mean anything to me yet, but it would. We built a life from there. Nothing flashy, just strong, clear, no pretending, and without even trying, I found my revenge. I stopped begging to be let back into rooms that were designed to keep me small. The lie didn't die when I left town. That's what I hadn't understood yet. I thought Charlie dropped a bomb and walked away, but he didn't. He kept feeding the fire, slow and steady, not dramatic, not loud, just enough to keep smoke rising so people back home could say, "Well, you never really know with Trevor." Alda would call me every few months and give her reports like clockwork. No fluff, no, maybe it's nothing, just the facts. "Your mother told Aunt Carrie you stopped practicing. Charlie told the Nelsons you'd been disciplined but covered it up. He said you changed your name out east." Every time she said something like that, I'd pause, not because it shocked me, but because it didn't. That's what got under my skin the most, how believable it had all become. Dahlia caught it from another angle. She pulled me aside one night after dinner and said, "I need to tell you something weird." A friend of hers, another lawyer, had gotten a vague inquiry through the state licensing board grapevine. Someone fishing around, asking whether I'd ever face disciplinary action. No formal complaint, just loose questions, like someone trying to stir mud without leaving fingerprints. We looked into it. The call had been placed from a number tied to an office in the upstate region, Briar Glen adjacent. I didn't need a forensics team to connect the dots. Charlie worked in medical equipment sales. That meant access to names, job titles, administrative contacts. He knew how to sound legitimate on the phone. He'd been working the edges, poking holes wherever he could. It wasn't enough to ruin me professionally, but that wasn't the goal. He wanted to corrode things, make people doubt, keep the version of me alive that he'd sold to our parents years ago. And I started to get it, really get it, when I learned something else, straight from him later on. He'd once tried to get into a paramedic training program, didn't last, not because he couldn't do the work, but because he couldn't handle being average in a room full of people who were better at it than he was. That explained it all. He didn't just envy me. He resented that I left and made something out of myself. He stayed back home, the golden boy in a small town, while I became someone respected in rooms he'd never be invited into. And if he couldn't climb, then he'd sabotage. Around the same time, Dahlia was chasing another case, quietly, carefully. It was about a hit-and-run pattern. Different incidents, same problem, a driver who vanished after every wreck. Witnesses were shaky, stories never matched, but one name kept surfacing in the aftermath. Blaine Harker. Smooth, well-connected, always one step ahead of real consequences. Sales, insurance, friends in useful places. Every time he hit someone, there was a circle ready to shield him. Dahlia didn't say much. She had her lines, and she didn't cross them. But I knew what it meant when she said, "That case is going to get bigger before it gets quieter." Joni picked up on things too. One night, after I'd finished a nasty abdominal rupture and was still scrubbing out, she leaned against the doorframe and said, "Your people have a type, you know that?" I said, "What kind of type?" She tilted her head. "The ones who act spotless in public and make someone else pay for it in private. Usually the kid who doesn't clap on cue." She wasn't wrong. By late 1991, my life had finally hit a rhythm. I had a marriage that didn't revolve around performance, a job where I earned respect, not borrowed it, a dog who didn't care about my last name, but that old story, the one Charlie built out of jealousy and cheap theater, it was still out there, whispered, recycled, passed off as concern. I didn't know it yet, but that story was about to come crashing into my OR, flesh and blood, name on a chart, bleeding all over my floor. It was one of those nights where the weather felt mean on purpose. Cold rain turning to sleet, the kind that makes the roads shine like glass. Inside, the trauma unit ran quiet but tight. I had 2 residents on shift, anesthesia hanging close, Joni managing the board like she always did. No wasted motion, no missed details. I still reached for the intake sheet, even though my body already knew what it was about to see. Charlie Carter. Joni was next to me before I even realized it. She saw my face and didn't ask anything dumb. Just said calm and quiet, "You want me to page Dr. Mott?" "Yeah," I said. "Tell him it's a family conflict. He'll understand." I grabbed a pen and wrote out the disclosure. Patient is immediate family, attending notified, alternate lead on scene. No hesitation, just a weight behind my ribs that wouldn't move. The doors crashed open and the stretcher rolled in fast. Paramedics shouting vitals, an intravenous line running, neck brace in place. I stepped aside, let Dr. Mott take lead, but I didn't walk away. I hovered at the side, gloves on, waiting to assist if needed. Charlie looked smaller than he ever had in my memory, shriveled up under the trauma blanket, skin pale and slick with blood, eyes half-lidded but not seeing. Then I saw them, my parents, Gideon and Maris Carter, walking in like ghosts from a bad dream. My dad still carried himself like he was in charge of the building, jaw locked, eyes scanning for someone to bark orders at. My mom followed behind him, thin, fragile, holding her purse like a shield. They didn't recognize me, not at first. I was in scrubs, cap, gloves, just another face in the room. My dad's focus was laser tight on Charlie. "That's my boy," he kept saying, over and over, like if he said it enough, it would make the blood disappear. I moved with the team, clamp, suction, step, assist. I knew the routine better than I knew my own birthday. Dr. Mott worked fast, torn vessels, fractured ribs, abdominal bleeding, no heroics, just trauma surgery as it really is, a race to not lose the game before the next round starts. Charlie didn't code. That surprised me. His vitals dipped, but he hung in there. When the bleeding was controlled and Dr. Mott closed the last stitch, he turned to me and said, "You want me to update the family?" I shook my head. "I've got it." He paused, gave me a look like he was seeing the whole backstory I'd never said out loud. Then he nodded once and peeled off his gloves. I stayed in the OR until Charlie was prepped for transfer. Watched the monitors, watched the nurse pack up instruments, watched the blood get wheeled out in red biohazard bags like trash no one wants to look at. I wasn't thinking about justice. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was just thinking about how strange it felt to stand over the body of the man who'd tried so hard to erase me while I was helping keep him alive. I walked straight into the waiting room, mask down, badge visible, scrub top still speckled from the worst of it. My parents stood up like they were spring-loaded. My dad took one step forward and said, "Doctor, is he?" and then stopped mid-sentence. His eyes dropped to my badge, then my face, then back again, like maybe he could make it say something else if he stared hard enough. My mom made a soft noise, something between a gasp and a sob, and grabbed his arm like she needed the contact to stay upright. Her fingers clutched so tight they turned white at the knuckles. I didn't let anything show on my face. I kept it clinical, detached. The tone I used when talking to families I'd never see again. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," I said evenly. "Charlie made it through surgery. He's stable for now, going to ICU. You'll be allowed in later when the nurse clears it. I watched the words land, watched them flinch at their own last name like they'd forgotten it could sound that formal. My mom started to step toward me. She reached out, slow and unsure, like maybe she thought we'd fall into some tearful reunion. I stepped back, just one small, clear motion, not dramatic, but definite. Her hand dropped. Her face did something tight and desperate, but she didn't push. My dad straightened his back like posture could give him the upper hand again. His voice came out with that forced calm I remembered too well. This isn't the time for... It became the time, I cut in, the second you stopped picking up my calls and started returning my mail. He opened his mouth like he had something else ready, but nothing came out. I didn't give him space to recover. I turned and walked out without another word because I had rounds to check and a full ICU waiting to hand Charlie off. That's how I've always survived. Handle the task. Don't leak out into the hallway. Later that night, Joni found me during a chart check and said, "You want to know what went down in that room?" I told her only if she was willing. She was. "Your dad didn't say much. Your mom did most of the talking, but not to Charlie. At first she just cried. Charlie sat there looking weak, which wasn't hard, but he played it." She sipped her coffee and kept going like she was reading it off a report. "He told them he'd been trying to protect them. Said he thought you were in a bad place and didn't want them to get hurt. Claimed it got out of hand. Tried to make it sound like a misunderstanding." Joni paused. "Then he said you were unstable. Still, present tense, like he thought if he said it gently, they'd believe it again." I clenched my jaw, but I didn't speak. And then Alda showed up. That made me look up. Joni grinned like she'd been waiting to drop the next part. "You didn't send her as backup, did you?" "No," I said. "I called her because she's family, to both of us." "Well," Joni said, "she walked in like she'd been preparing for trial. Opened a folder right there at the nurse's station and handed it to your father. Leave approvals, postmarked mail, dates, copies of everything." She shifted, lowering her voice. She had the forged withdrawal letter, the one Charlie made, showed them the wrong title in the header, pointed out the signature line was stolen from your med school welcome packet, all of it laid out like a crime scene. "And your dad?" Joni shook her head. "He just sat down, didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, just stared at the page like it was a mirror that finally worked." I didn't ask for more. I just stood there holding a pen I hadn't used for 20 minutes and thought, so this is how truth gets in, the long way around. The next morning, my parents called like nothing had ever gone quiet between us. Like the last 10 years were just a misunderstanding we could iron out over coffee and good intentions. My mom asked if I wanted to talk things through. My dad said, "Let's move forward." I told them, no more metaphors. We do it in plain language or not at all. They wanted to jump straight to healing, like buying a new ladder could erase the years they spent helping Charlie dig the hole. But I wasn't after apologies in bulk. I was after clarity and conditions. So we met in daylight, their kitchen table in Briar Glen. Same spot where most of my childhood decisions had been made for me without asking. This time I walked in with my own terms. I didn't yell. I didn't give speeches. I laid out exactly what contact would look like, what they could expect from me, and what I'd never allow again. No rewriting history, no soft-serve versions of what Charlie did. And the first time I heard, "Let's not dwell," I would be gone. My dad tried to argue, out of habit. Then he looked at me, really looked, and something dropped in his face. Not defiance, exhaustion, like he realized for the first time that I'd grown into someone he no longer had control over. My mom kept repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," like the phrase itself would fix things. I told her, Sorry's a beginning, not a payment. She nodded, but her eyes didn't meet mine. A week later, I met Charlie, Neutral Ground, a beat-up diner off Route 19. I wasn't bringing him into my home, and I wasn't stepping inside his. Dahlia came too, sat 2 booths down, reading case notes with her coffee like she was just killing time, but she was listening. She missed nothing. Charlie walked in like he didn't know how to limp convincingly. He still had visible bruising from the crash, but his usual polish was gone. He looked like someone who hadn't slept well in weeks and knew he wasn't the victim this time. He sat down and opened with weak lines. You know how Dad is, and I didn't mean for it to go that far. I let him burn through it, then asked, why did you keep it going? That froze him. No crowd to perform for, no parents to play referee. He looked down at the chip table, let out a long breath, and said it. I made the letter. I lied. I kept lying because I couldn't stand that Dad finally looked at you like he looked at me. That wasn't an apology, but it was the truth. And for the first time in my life, I saw him for what he really was. Not a golden boy, not a mastermind, just a man so afraid of being ordinary he decided to poison the well. Then Dahlia slid into the booth without asking. She set her coffee down and asked, cool and even, do you know Blaine Harker? Charlie blinked. Hard. He's a client, he said. Why? Because he's tied to multiple hit and runs, she said. And someone's been helping clean up behind him, redirecting questions, spinning stories, misdirecting reports. That trail leads back to you, Charlie. He didn't deny it. He didn't confess either, just leaned back like the air got thinner. He said, I didn't drive. You protected someone who did, Dahlia replied. That's obstruction. If we dig, we'll find more. You know that. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She just stated it like she was reading the weather forecast. And Charlie knew she meant every word. I laid out my own terms. No drama, no revenge. You want to stay in contact, you write the truth, exactly what you did, to every relative you lied to about me. Alda gets a copy. If you twist it or stall, I'm out for good. He nodded like a man cornered by facts, not fists. The moment that hit my dad hardest came weeks later. He visited, alone, and Belka was in the yard. She walked up to him, sniffed his boots, then circled back to me and leaned into my leg. She didn't bark. She didn't growl. She just checked I was still okay. My dad watched that like it was a lesson he didn't expect. He didn't say anything, but his shoulders slumped an inch. That inch mattered more than any apology. Sometimes the shift isn't loud, it's just real. In the months that followed, nobody gave speeches, nobody fell to their knees, but everything shifted. Charlie's story couldn't float anymore, not after the documents went out. Plain, dated, sourced, verified. Alda made sure they landed in every mailbox that mattered. His confession wasn't dramatic. It was brief and final. He admitted he forged a withdrawal letter, admitted he lied to my parents, admitted he kept lying year after year. Most of the family didn't reply. No outrage, no pity, just silence. And for Charlie, silence hit harder than blame. He wasn't built to be doubted. The moment people stopped seeing him as charming, he faded fast. Dahlia's thread didn't stop either. The Harker case moved forward, slow but steady. Blaine got charged. Charlie didn't go down with him, but he got pulled into the mess. Subpoenas, depositions, reputation damage. Nobody called him a criminal, but fewer people trusted him with their problems after that. And Charlie lived on trust. There weren't any fireworks, just doors closing, gently but permanently. My parents started showing up again, but on my terms. No grand apologies, no family dinners. Just a letter from my mom with no excuses, no requests. a quiet visit from my dad where we sat on the porch and didn't pretend we were anything we weren't. He didn't apologize, not directly, but he asked how Belka was doing. That was enough to tell me he'd been thinking. My mom tried harder. She asked about my work, sent birthday cards with real notes inside. Sometimes she slipped and said something like, "We just didn't know what was true," and I'd stop her. "We're not rewriting it," I'd say. "We build forward or not at all." She'd nod, even if it stung, and that was the work. Charlie and I didn't become brothers again. We didn't grab beers or call on holidays. I didn't need him to like me. I didn't need him in my house. What I needed was for the story to die, for the lie to stop walking into rooms ahead of me, and it did. I kept working, kept living, kept walking my own path, not chasing approval, not begging for it. I saved Charlie's life that night because I could, because I was the only one in the room who knew how. That doesn't mean I owed him peace. It means I owed myself integrity. Now, at 65, I don't pretend everything got tied up neat. Reconciliation isn't a hug, it's access. And for the first time in my life, I control the terms. I decide how close anyone gets and when, and that finally is enough. Would you have accepted Charlie's apology or walked away for good? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story landed with you, like and subscribe for more. Hold up, can I ask you something personal before you click away? If you've got the hype button, tap it to support this video and help it reach more people, then please subscribe and hit like. It's one click and it really matters. And tell me in the comments, if your own family chose a lie over you, would you ever reopen that door, or would you lock it for good?